She cheated on me and laughed when I cried, so I made sure she'd never laugh again. I still remember the look on her face when she laughed. It was one of the most painful moments of my life. The woman I thought I knew and loved, the woman I had stood by through thick and thin, had betrayed me in a way I couldn't fathom. I was devastated, but the pain wasn't just in the affair itself, it was in her reaction to me when I found out. She laughed, not just a chuckle or an awkward giggle, but a full-on laugh, like it was all some sick joke. Her name is Jessica, and we had been married for 5 years. Our relationship was far from perfect, but we made it work. I thought we understood each other. When we met, I was a young man just starting out in my career. Jessica was the one who made me feel like I had worth. She had this light about her that drew people in, and I fell for it completely. We got married, bought a house, and everything seemed to fall into place. At the time, it felt like I had found my soulmate. We talked about our future, our goals, our dreams. She was the person I wanted to share everything with. But as time passed, things started to change. I noticed subtle shifts, her distance, her irritability, her increasing coldness. But I tried to ignore them. After all, life isn't perfect, and I figured she was just going through a phase, just like I had a few of my own. But those changes were more than just a phase. They were the cracks that began to split open, revealing the lies I had refused to see. Jessica became more secretive, more aloof. I had started working longer hours, trying to get ahead in my career, but I was still present. I made time for her. I bought flowers, I planned small trips, I did everything I could to make sure she knew I loved her. But it wasn't enough. I was becoming desperate. I kept asking her if something was wrong, but she'd always brush it off, saying everything was fine. It wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. I was losing her without even realizing it. I had put so much of my time and energy into being a good husband that I neglected to see what was happening right in front of me. One night, everything came to a head. I had come home early from work, eager to surprise her. I wanted to make dinner, light some candles, and maybe reignite the spark we had lost over time. I opened the door, expecting to find her sitting on the couch, reading or watching TV. But what I found instead shattered my entire world. Jessica was in our bedroom, and she wasn't alone. Sitting on the edge of the bed was our neighbor, Michael. He was a guy who had always been friendly, always willing to help with yard work or little things around the house. I never thought much of it, but seeing him there with Jessica, it was impossible to ignore the chemistry between them. There was no denying it. It was like something clicked in my head. This wasn't just a casual encounter. This was something far deeper. My heart dropped into my stomach as I stood frozen in the doorway. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. Is this really happening? I asked, my voice trembling. Jessica didn't seem shocked by my arrival. In fact, she just stared at me, almost like she was waiting for me to react. Michael, on the other hand, looked uncomfortable but didn't seem guilty. There was a weird sense of nonchalance in the air, a calmness that made everything feel even worse. "Don't just stand there," Jessica finally said, her voice almost bored. "Come in." I felt a wave of nausea hit me, and my heart pounded in my chest. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to yell, to throw something, but I couldn't find the words. My entire world seemed to crumble in front of my eyes, and all I could do was stand there, utterly lost. "You're sleeping with him?" I asked in disbelief, my voice barely above a whisper. Jessica didn't even flinch. "Yes, I am. I didn't want to hurt you, but I've been unhappy for a while now." It just happened. Unhappy? That was her explanation? After everything we had shared? After all the years I had invested into our marriage, that was her reason? I had bent over backward to keep this marriage intact, to show her love and patience, but none of that mattered anymore. She wasn't interested in me anymore, not in the way I needed her to be. And then, the unthinkable happened. She laughed, a sharp, bitter laugh that cut through the air. "You really thought you were the only one who mattered, didn't you?" How cute. The sound of her laughter reverberated in my ears like a cruel mockery. My world spun as I struggled to comprehend what was happening. The betrayal stung deeper than I could ever have imagined. How could she be so cold? How could she laugh at the man who loved her? Why? Was all I managed to say. Why him? Why this? Jessica looked at me like she was explaining something trivial, like telling me she didn't like a certain brand of cereal. Because I could. Because you stopped seeing me. I needed something, someone, and Michael was there. Her words stung, like poison sinking into my veins. They weren't just a confession of an affair. They were a rejection of me, of everything we had built together. I was nothing to her anymore. I had lost everything in an instant. Without saying another word, I grabbed my keys and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. The rage inside of me boiled over, but I didn't know where to go. I just drove. I drove around for hours, numb to everything around me. The pain in my chest was suffocating, like I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was so deep, it felt like I was drowning in it. It took everything in me not to go back, to confront her again, to beg her to explain why she did it. But I knew there was nothing left to say. She had made her choice. And now, I would have to make mine. That night, I stayed with a friend. I couldn't bring myself to go back to the house, not yet. I needed time to think, to figure out what I was going to do. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't let her get away with it. The next few weeks were a blur. I didn't speak to Jessica. I avoided her calls, her texts, and I kept my distance from everything that reminded me of her. But then, one evening, she showed up at my friend's apartment. She begged me to listen, to talk. She said she was sorry, that it was a mistake. But her eyes betrayed her. She wasn't sorry. She was angry that I was taking her affair so seriously. The audacity of it. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just about the affair. This was about control. Jessica didn't care about me, not the way I had cared about her. She wanted to make sure I was in her grip, that I didn't get away. She had never respected me as an equal partner. She saw me as someone she could control, someone to manipulate. And that's when I decided something. I wouldn't let her get away with it. I wouldn't just be the victim. I wouldn't let her laugh at me anymore. If she thought she could make me suffer, then I would make her suffer, too. But it wouldn't be in the way she expected. It wouldn't be a tantrum or an outburst. It would be a calculated, slow burn. She would understand the depths of what she had done. But I didn't do it immediately. I needed time to plan. I needed to think of something that would make her feel the same helplessness, the same devastation I had felt. I needed her to understand the pain she had caused. So, I started working on a plan. The first step was to dismantle her social life. I began by talking to our mutual friends. I wasn't cruel about it, but I made sure they knew the truth. I told them everything. How she had betrayed me. How she had laughed in my face. Once they knew, they couldn't unknow it. It wasn't long before they started distancing themselves from her. Some of our friends sided with me, while others just didn't know what to say. But it didn't matter. She was losing control over her own life. The network she had built for herself began to crumble. Next, I started to look into her career. Jessica had always prided herself on her professional reputation. She worked in marketing, and she loved the social aspect of her job. She had worked hard to get to where she was. But I knew she had also built her career on a facade, an image of someone who had it all together. And I was going to tear that image down. I subtly let slip some information about her affair to a few of her colleagues. I didn't make it too obvious, but I made sure to plant the seeds of doubt. I didn't need to ruin her job, but I did need to take away her comfort. Slowly, her standing in her company started to slip. She was passed over for promotions, her colleagues began to avoid her, and she couldn't understand why. It was all because of what I had set in motion. But the final act was the hardest. I decided I wouldn't simply walk away from the marriage. I would stay. I would play the role of the doting husband. I would pretend like everything was fine, like I had forgiven her. And then, on our anniversary, when she thought everything was fine, I would reveal everything. The day came, and I took her out to dinner. She looked at me with that same smile, the one she had always used to disguise the truth. As we ate, she seemed oblivious to the fact that the guilt was creeping into her heart. She thought I had forgiven her. But I hadn't. I was waiting for the right moment, the moment when she would realize everything had changed. And then, right in the middle of dinner, I dropped the bombshell. I know about Michael, and I know about everything else, too. Her face went pale. Her smile disappeared. She didn't say a word. Just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I've been planning this for a while, I said softly. You thought you could just laugh at me. But now, I'm the one laughing. Her entire world crumbled before her eyes. She could feel the consequences of her actions pressing down on her. But I didn't stop there. I didn't want to give her the satisfaction of an easy escape. I hope you understand, I said, that what I've done is just a taste of what you've put me through. She didn't say anything for the rest of the meal. She sat there in silence, her mind racing, unable to process what had just happened. And I didn't care. I wanted her to feel every ounce of what I had felt when I discovered her betrayal. After dinner, I left. I didn't need to stay. I had won. The woman who had destroyed me, who thought she could get away with laughing at me, was now the one who would feel the weight of her betrayal. I had taken control of the situation. Now, I'm not sure where I stand. My life has moved on. I've rebuilt myself, emotionally and socially. I've made new friends, I've found new goals, and I've learned to trust again. But I can't help but wonder if I've crossed a line. Should I have done this? Should I have just walked away and let her deal with the consequences of her actions? I'll never know for sure. But one thing is clear. I don't regret standing up for myself. The world may not always be fair, but sometimes, you have to make sure people know that actions have consequences.